Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cultivate Your Success Podcast. My name's Colleen, your host, and I have an extra special guest for you today. This man is the classic example of a musician who has dynamic talents of a singer, songwriter, pastor, speaker, author, two-time author, that is, and TV host. Javen has starred in numerous stage productions. He was a lead in the theatrical production, A Raisin in the Sun. He also starred in the off-Broadway musical, The Rock and the Rabbi. And you've probably seen him on the big screen as supporting roles in other feature films. Now, most recently, Javen has founded the Worship in the Now Ministries, which later produced the Now Church. You've probably seen him on TV as well, on TBN. He is the co-host for the music show Gospel Worship Experience. And most importantly, wait for this, listeners, Javen was presented with the Lifetime Achievement Award from the White House and President Obama for his humanitarian efforts in the community. Now, there's so much more I can tell you about him, but we'll get into that here, and we're going to be talking about his book. So welcome. Thank you so much, Javen, for joining us today.
Thank you, Colleen, for having me. I'm glad to be here with you.
Gosh, where do we start? We have so many things to talk about. Now, I love the acting part, and I love that you have your own ministry, and I love the fact that you are coming out with a brand new book called Do It Now. So first of all, tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are. Let's begin with that.
Well, I'm a son of a preacher, grew up in church in South Florida, and eventually went to a Christian college in Tennessee, Lee University. And from there, I ended up taking on a position at a church in Tampa, unknown church at the time in Tampa, with an unknown preacher at the time by the name of Pastor Paula White. After being there almost 10 years, I then went to Los Angeles, California, and I got my first record deal that led me into Los Angeles. From Los Angeles, I stayed there for about 10, 12 years, and that's what got me into movies, into music. And about that 12th year, God spoke to me about moving back to my hometown, Hollywood, Florida, and launching the Now Church, which was about 6 years ago. And through that whole process comes movies, books, music, TV, et cetera, et cetera. But I know we don't have a lot of time, so that's the short version.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And I know we can go down many rabbit holes with all of that. Wow.
Right.
Okay, gosh. So let's get right to it. Let's talk about your book that you have coming out. It's called Do It Now. What inspired you to write this book?
Well, first off, this book is 5 years in the making. I had really been pondering the subject of now and the power of now. As a matter of fact, it actually started back in 2011. I released a CD entitled Worship in the Now with gospel artist Jonathan Nelson. That CD produced a seminar that we started doing called Worship in the Now Seminar. And we started taking that on the road. I'd have different worship leaders sing and that kind of thing. We'd have classes. People started asking for, not only the ministry, but for the message. How can we hear more about the Now message? And I just began to ponder in my heart about what really has been the key to my success and the key to my resilience and restoration and getting back up and that kind of thing after having dealt with so many different things like we all do. And God just began to me, Colleen, it's more of an unveiling that I somehow tapped into what is my now in every season of my life. And God began to really open my eyes about how powerful the now is for all of us. And to cultivate that message, I then launched the Now Church. I then launched the TV show called Now Living. We opened up a facility called the Now Center. And it just really became evident to me that the Now message is something that I needed to put in writing, that I needed to make sure that there was an understanding that we're not talking about impulse. When we say live in the now or live now, we're not saying just live impulsively and just kind of do whatever is in front of you now, but there is a whole revelation behind that. And that's why we had to put the book together.
Wow. Okay. I want to come back to the book in a second, but you mentioned the Now Center. Is that the Center for the Underprivileged Youth? Yeah. Can you
Yes.
tell us a little bit about that and how you're helping out the community in that way?
So when we launched the Now Church, it was always important for me and for what I felt the call of God was for us to do, and that is put the community first, put ministry first, put hands and feet to the gospel. So before, and it being a church plant, we didn't necessarily have a building. So when we first found a facility, it was important for me and for us to open a facility that met the needs of the community first, not the needs of just another sanctuary, so to speak, or a place to come and gather and just have church, but a place that can be multifaceted. So we opened up a place called the Now Center that we utilize, and we open it up to the community and to the political officials in that area, the mayor and commissioners, and just for whatever is needed in the community. So the Now Center has been used as a safe hub for feeding, for when we need to, if the community needs to use it for folks to get food during desperate times. During the hurricane season, it was a place where people could come and get shelter. We had families actually live there, stay there when their lights and things went out. It's been used to organize all of our planning and our skills, something we do every year, our SummerSlam sport camp for over 200 underprivileged children. We gather clothes, we pack books, book bags, and school supplies, and we go out every summer and pull kids literally off the streets. We partner with the foster care system, and we bring those kids in, and we do our best to love on them, for a full week of camp, mentoring them, and of course, coaching them through sports. And we get the fire department and police department and different ones come out and train them in hopes that they might see a possible career for them and see a future for their destiny. So we're extremely excited about the Now Center.
Wow, that's fantastic. It's so great to see a church that has like a whole separate area just for helping out the community, like you said. And you're in South Florida, correct? Where is this center in South Florida?
Correct. We're in Hollywood, Florida. Hollywood is nestled right between Fort Lauderdale and Miami. We have two exits.
Yeah, yeah. And and that's so important. That's really awesome you open it up for families because during hurricane season, oh my gosh, South Florida, that's huge. So
Yeah.
thank you for doing that. Wow, that's so incredible. And I know at the end I would like to get maybe a website if you can or is there a website you can mention right now if people wanted to help donate for that particular cause?
Sure, they can go to thenowcenter.org. I believe it's thenowcenter.org. Of course, if you can't, if that address is not right, just go to mine, which is javenonline.com, and we can lead you to that, or go to the church website, which is nowchurchfl, and there's a link to the Now Center as well.
Perfect. And I'll put some of these links in the show notes as well. So that's awesome. So I had to make sure we got that in there because I think that's just a great cause that you do. And
Thank you.
let's go back to your book. And it's so funny because I didn't even, I read your book as of like last night, but when I asked you to be a guest on my show, I just thought, you were awesome. You would be great for this podcast because of the spiritual aspect and everything that you're doing. But little did I know that the first sentence in your first chapter, which is called The Now Way of Life, your very first sentence talks about what is real success. Wow. And I usually ask all of my guests what their definition of success is. So can you go into a little bit more detail about that chapter and your definition of success?
Well, yeah, it's so the title, the first title of the book is The Now Way of Life. And I think that, there's nobody in their right mind that don't want to see success in their life, for their marriage, for their family, for the kids, certainly for their career. And I think that, the number one way I believe to live successfully is to live in your now and understand what the now way of life is all about. And what that really means is that means living on purpose. And not, a lot of times we talk about living with purpose, but I actually talk about in the book what it means to live on purpose. If you tell people to live with purpose, it actually probably raises more questions than it does give answers, because now I got to figure out what my purpose is, and am I tapping into my purpose? And it becomes all these rabbit trails trying to figure that out. But when you tell people to live on purpose, that becomes a little bit more of a reachable goal. And that is by making up in your mind that every day that you live, everything that you are a part of, even something as simple as this interview, that you purposely make up in your mind, I'm going to get out of this what I need to get out of it, and I'm going to put into it what I need to put into it. So I purposely make sure that I target myself and position myself for the success of that moment. I think what we make the mistake of doing is trying to broad stream everything, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, only to end up with, less than 20%, most of us less than 5% of that whole thing we mapped out for 20 years. What if we stopped trying to do 20 years down the road, 10 years down the road, and we began to say, let me take what is in front of me right now and let me maximize it to its fullest potential, and let that beginning become many beginnings that create what we call a past. And therefore, you begin to have a history and a future that is full of success.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I'm looking at your chapters now, and last night I got your book, and I got through like half of it. I mean, I read like 100 pages. I couldn't put it down, and then finally I'm like, oh, I better go to sleep now. So there were some very good chapters in here, and let me just read off for the listeners. Some of the chapters is waking up to now, understanding your beginning, and that's really very important. And how about now with the COVID-19, getting unstuck, and then there's another good one here, overcoming obstacles in your now season. Oh my goodness, this is so relevant, and you didn't even know this when you were writing it, but we always have obstacles, but especially now with the virus going on, so many people have lost their jobs or reduced hours, having to deal with kids at home and homeschooling situations they're not used to. Can you tell us a little bit about how some of these chapters of that, some parts of this book, how this can apply to people today with this crisis going on?
Well, one of the things that I talk about, I believe it's chapter 4, where I talk about, you just mentioned it, understanding your beginnings. And I think that chapter is one of many in this book that really speaks to the revelation of what we're dealing with now. I notice I don't say fix your beginnings. I don't say try to redo your beginnings or relive your beginnings. I just simply say understand your beginnings. I think that sometimes if we can just put an understanding on the globalness of what's going on, it will sometimes ease our spirits, and it will give us the kind of peace we need to weather the storm. So many times people think that whatever they're facing in something like COVID-19 and quarantine, that even though everybody's dealing with, it's very easy to forget, and you may take it personal, and you may feel victimized, and you may feel like, I can't take this, and it's too much, and there's, and I got to give in or give up or throw in the towel. And the reality is, you're not the only one dealing with this. It's a global, that's why they call it a pandemic. It's a global thing. And there are people around the world that are experiencing the exact same thing that you're experiencing. So don't feel like you did anything wrong. Don't feel like you didn't prepare right, or, you messed up here or messed up there. No, just get an understanding of the fact that life sometimes will throw you curveballs, and that life sometimes will just be absolutely negative. And that life really is full, the scripture says that in this life, there's full of trouble and there's problems, and that the world, period, is evil. And so therefore, if you kind of purpose in your heart and in your mind that I have an understanding that if I know how and what things were all about from the beginning of my life, because many of us have had a very challenging beginning, in our childhood. Many of us dealt with, maybe parents that weren't the best scenarios for us. Some people don't know their parents. Some people don't know their father. Some people went through divorced parents. Some people went through abuse as children. Many of us, unfortunately, were not born into economically astute families, financial struggles in the beginning. Many of us were lost in trying to figure out who we were. When we began to live in our now, we start understanding what these things really meant and how they cultivate us into being the success that we are today. If you then know that, then you begin to understand your current season too will work together for a successful future for your tomorrow. But the scripture tells us that when the Bible tells us that all things are working together for your good. It may not look good. It may not feel good. It may not sound good, but when it's all said and done, it's going to work for your good according to those that are called according to his purpose. And so you need to know that in your now, always walk in your purpose, and you will see and feel the energy that you need and the positivity that you need to get through it.
Yes, absolutely. So important. And as you mentioned, the chapter is understand your beginnings. And that's true. When anytime anybody goes in for any counseling or anything like that, the first thing they ask you is about your childhood. So it all starts with how you were raised in the mindset as well, your environment, which I wanted to talk about. I wanted to go a little deeper into overcoming obstacles in your now season, the part when you talk about when perception becomes reality. Oh, that's so good. And I know, I tell you, Javen, that's what I do. I'm a speaker as well. And I talk, one of my favorite topics is talking about the mindset and how powerful our mind is. Can you go into more detail about this segment here in the chapter?
So everybody hears the famous statement, perception is reality, but the real statement is your perception becomes your reality. That perception is only a reality to the person that's perceiving it. And when you start talking about having the perspective or your perception, that's really dealing with the filter that information is coming into your brain or coming into your psyche. We all are getting the information. People that are watching this interview right now, will all get the same information, but based upon their perception, and based upon their filter, it will determine how they receive the information. If a coach comes into a room and he begins to yell aggressively, and he gets in, the players' faces and whatnot, if one of the player feels victimized, he's going to believe that that coach is being extremely abusive. That coach is being extremely disrespectful. And he may walk out of that place defeated. He might walk out of that place hurt. If the other player is a victor and he's a champion and he's coming to win, when that coach gets in his face and say, get up and get going, that player is not going to feel like the coach is being disrespectful. That player is not going to feel like the coach is being harmful. He's going to say, thank you. That's what I needed. Thank you for that motivation. Thank you for, giving me a swift kick in the pants so I can get out there and make things happen. So your perception is extremely crucial because it will tell you what kind of life you are currently having. And that's why you got to make sure that the filters that you have for your eyes, the filters that you have for your ears, the filters that you have for your heart, that it really is a good, positive filter. Again, that all things are working together for my good. That like Joseph said, what you meant for my bad, come on, it just worked for my good. Like Job said, that though he slay me, yet will I trust him. So I just think that perception is a very much, to be honest with you, every preacher, every speaker should be speaking about perception, because it doesn't matter how much of the good news we share with them. It doesn't matter how much of the good news we sing about. If somebody's perception is negative, that's all they're going to ever hear. You're saying that just because you want something from me, or you're saying that because you don't understand what I've been through, or you're saying that because you're the preacher you're supposed to. See, you're saying that because you're mom. A child will say that to the parents all the time. Or you're saying that because you're the parent, you don't understand. They don't realize that the mom used to be out there just as bad as them back in the day. So it really is a very important topic, and that's why we I made sure it had to be a part of our book, Do It Now.
All right. Preach, Pastor, preach. That was some good stuff there. Woo. All right. So let me ask you, is there a favorite part of the book that you really like, or a favorite chapter, or anything else you want to talk about?
Well, no, I don't have, I would say, a favorite part other than something that I always kind of reference back to is the what you would call the introduction of the book. And that's where I go all the way back to why I even have the mindset that I do about now anyway. And that's where I started talking about watching old black and white movies. I'm a huge history buff. I was in the honor roll when it came to history all throughout school. For some reason, I just like the nostalgia of looking back and trying to get in the minds of great men and women and actors and actresses. And I talk about, when I first start the book, about looking at old Oscar award-winning pictures, the old Johnny Carson shows, and just things like that. And you just see these great actors and singers, you know, like Frank Sinatra and Ella Fitzgerald and different ones. And you just wonder if they realized that there was going to come a day when they will not be even thought about for the most part of the generation that we now live in, that most of our kids don't even know who they are. But they were rulers and you know, they were bigger than life in those moments. And I just wonder sometimes, you know, did they know it? You know, did they realize this was their best moment, and that did they really take it all in? Because one day they would be a mere memory, you know. And I think so much about us, you know, that are alive today. You know, do we really take in every moment that when you grab a mic to take a stage, when you know, kiss or hug your child, or when you have that job that sometimes you complain about a little bit too much, that, you know what, man, this is the most incredible moment that life will ever bring to you, whatever moment that is. You know, that, you know, I think back to, I talk about in the book, in my beginnings, you know, having the little apartment and taking a step of faith, living in a Holiday Inn. When I first left Tampa and went to Los Angeles, California, I had a big home and I sold it. And it wasn't like I, you know, had a bad situation. I had a great situation, but I was going after more. And that more led me to the Holiday Inn on Ventura Boulevard in Studio City, California, for about 2.5 weeks, because this is before Wi-Fi and GPS and iPhones. You know, this is 2000, and you can believe technology has drastically changed just over the past 5 years. So in 2002, 2003, we didn't really have Wi-Fi. If you think about that, like we used to, I remember plugging in the telephone big long cord into the Holiday Inn, and you know, the dial up and hearing all that, trying to find a home in California and going through that process. And you know, here's what I can tell you. I'm not going to tell you that I passed a lot of my now tests, but I will tell you that there were many of them that I did pass. I can tell you that in that hotel room, in that moment, in that now moment, I was excited. I was full of joy. I didn't feel victimized. I didn't feel like it was a mistake. I didn't feel like I missed God. I was culling. I was pumped. I was excited. I knew that great things were coming. I was so excited about it. I literally slowed it down and took it all in, so that when the house did come and when the other things did come, I could say I appreciated what I did have. And I think that's what living in the now is all about.
Yes. And you know what? I love your story. And I just hope that our listeners can get their hands on this book. You've got some really good stuff in there. And I love the fact that you came from a family of 13 siblings, or 12 siblings. You're like number 12 of 13. Wow. And as you mentioned about as you mentioned about technology, now there's probably a lot of people that were trying to avoid doing Zoom calls and even avoiding social media. Well, now we have to embrace the now with this virus. A lot of us had to go in. For those people that did not embrace the now, which, you know, internet's been around for a long time, they got a rude awakening in the last 2 months. And I really hope they were able to get up to speed. There's so much that your book covers. I'm so excited for your book. Now, what I like about your book, Javen, is that at the end of each chapter, you have like a little practice section and the wisdom keys. And so that's cool. So anything else you want to tell us about your book, and when can we get our hands on this book?
Thank you. And again, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Well, the book is entitled Do It Now, Why Wait When Your Best Is Now. It comes out July the 12th. It will be available wherever books are sold, Barnes & Noble, Amazon. It is available for Kindle. Some people are asking, will it be audio? I haven't done the audio version of the book yet. But if y'all buy the book and if it's enough of a success and we get enough of a demand for it, we'll definitely go into the studio and do an audio version of the book. I believe, Colleen, that Do It Now is for leaders. I believe it's for women. It's for students. It's for college folks that are pursuing their careers. It's for entrepreneurs and people that just want to stay motivated. One of the hardest things to do in a very tough world is to stay motivated. And there's not a time more than ever before than right now than ever that we do need to stay motivated. There's a lot of personal things that people are going through, and we're all dealing with COVID-19 in our own personal way, because it's a pandemic. It's a stressful time. And, you know, if you already had things that you were going through and then you piled this on top of that, it's just been a very hard time for people. And I'm telling you, Do It Now reminds us of how that you cannot wait, that you have to take advantage of every moment, and how that you have to live even if you're weak. You have to live even if you're alone. You have to live even if you're broken or brokenhearted. This book really points you and kind of navigates you. You know, you may not read it chronologically. You may jump around to the last chapter and talk about, you know, how to help others. You may jump to a middle chapter and talk about, you know, how to understand your beginning, so you can deal with kind of a relationship issue that you currently got going on right now that you can't seem. You know, I was in a season of my life one time, and I talk about it in the book, where I was depressed and didn't know it. You know, I was, you know, just thought that was something that's how you just felt. I thought everybody was feeling like how I was feeling, not realizing that I was actually in a season of straight depression. And I talk about that in the book and how I navigated through that and how I got back up and made it happen. And so I really just, you know, encourage and let me say this to my folks that don't read books. I didn't either. I wasn't, you know, I wasn't how you were able to, like how you said you read 100. I wasn't able to do that at first. I wasn't necessarily a book reader, but I started realizing that, you know what, there's a lot of information. There's a lot of wealth. You know, you want to talk about where the wealth is? The wealth is in books. It is in books, baby. If you don't learn how to read, or, you know, learn how to have a love for reading, you are just missing out on life. And the thing about it is, you don't have to read as fast as the other person. You know, you can take your own time. That's what freed me up, and that's what got me into reading. I just, you know, if I can only do one chapter per week, okay, that's my tempo. Oh, well, I'll get it done. That's how I will get the book done. And I was not intimidated. And therefore, I just end up building my library that way. And I'll tell you, this is something that you want to have in your library. As a matter of fact, I hope and pray that many professors and leaders, especially ministry leaders, I wish I had something like this when I was the youth running the young adults at the local church, when I was younger as a minister. This would have helped me a lot. This really helped, I think, a lot of young people, and I know I'm going a little longer, but I think a lot of young people struggle with enjoying their youth for sake of trying to get out of the house. You know, I can't wait till I get out of this house, you know, or I can't wait till I, you know, graduate from college, or I can't wait till I, you know, do this and do that, only to realize those are your best years. You know, now is your best time, whatever that is. In whatever season you're in, it's the best season. And we talk about it, and I'm telling you, this book will change your life.
That's so true. Wow, what you said about reading. I know they always say the millionaires, like Warren Buffett, he reads every single night. I forgot how many books he reads a year, but it's quite a few. And people like you and other people who write books, you know, we're learning from your lessons. I mean, how many years would you rather have that experience yourself, or would you rather read about it and kind of learn from somebody else and take 15 years off of your life in the learning experience? It's so true. And you have some really good nuggets in this book. Wow. Now, did you have a favorite quote or a favorite scripture that you would like to leave for our listeners today?
No, my favorite scripture, Philippians 1:6, is my signature scripture. I think I might have signed it at the end of the book. I'm not sure. But it's where Paul says, being confident of this one thing, that he which has begun a good work in you will be faithful to complete it until the day of Jesus Christ. And to me, that really sums up the entire book, Do It Now. And that is, we are all a completed work, that all of this stuff was already set in motion before the foundations of the earth, both our failures and our successes, our ups and our downs. And the good news about all of it is it's already done. It's already completed. And our job, you say, well, if it's already done, what am I supposed to do? The only thing we're supposed to do is just to walk it out, just live it out, walk in faith, and just trust God all the way, knowing that whatever we're going to be, I was already an author. I just didn't know it, but I'm glad I kept walking it out in order for the manifestation to show itself. I was already a recording artist. You know, I didn't know it at 19, 18 years old and 17 years old. I had an idea. There were glimpses. Bishop Jake says God gives you glimpses. I had glimpses of some things, but there certainly wasn't no manifestation, but I kept on walking. And the completion of what was already there, I just kind of discovered it. You know, purpose is a part of discovery. Purpose is just bumping into different bumps in the roads along the way in order to go to that next level. But if you're not walking to hit that bump, then you're never going to receive it. So I just encourage all of your listeners, all your viewers today, to know that you are already a complete, I don't care how insignificant you may feel, or how you may not have had. I remember in the middle of my first year in college, thinking I'm never gonna get through this, and 4 years later, I was thinking, it's over. What am I gonna do now? Life happens very quick. It happens very fast. And I'm telling you right now, if you don't begin to acknowledge your now, you will miss a lifetime of riches. And I hope that when the book does come out, you all get a chance to get it, because I really think it will help you not only in your now season today, but in your many now seasons to come.
Very good. Wow. And as you mentioned about walking, if you're not walking, if you're not doing your thing, you're not going to experience the things you need to. And one of my favorite evangelists, Joyce Meyer, I've heard her say, you can't drive a parked car. So you got to keep moving forward, even if it means hitting a few bumps, as you said. Wow, this is good stuff. So thank you again, Javen. So I'll put this in the show notes, but is it javenonline.com? Yeah?
Yeah, so the website is javenonline.com. Our social media, which is Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, are all at Javen Online, JAVENONLINE. And thank you again for having me, and thank you for supporting and keeping good information out like how you're doing. All the best to you, and I pray that more and more things are to come.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time here. All right, listeners, thanks for joining us, and have a good day. Thanks, Javen.
Thank you.